The hush was immediate and profound and almost electric quiet, as though every molecule of air had halted in suspense. At the center of it all stood a young black teenager, no older than 17, gazing up at Judge Calloway with an unflinching calm that defied her years. Moments earlier, the judge had been ridiculing her with unrestrained scorn. He was well known in the Stonebridge legal circuit for his caustic wit and was notorious for flaying even seasoned lawyers alive. "You dare to represent yourself?" Judge Calloway had snarled, slamming his gavel. "What sort of farce is this? Court isn't a playground, young lady." Laughter and headshakes had rippled through the courtroom, from the bailiff leaning against the wall to the court clerk flipping through her notes. Danielle Sterling, the teenager in question, kept her chin high. She offered no apology, no retreat. And now that she spoke, something changed in the atmosphere. Her words, meticulously chosen, began to dismantle the prosecution's entire case in a calm, laser-focused manner. Within minutes, the previously smug expressions around the courtroom gave way to rapt attention. One of the seasoned prosecutors, Robert Bowden, leapt to his feet. "Objection!" Bowden sputtered, color draining from his face as he realized how effectively Danielle was countering each piece of the state's evidence. "I have reason to believe this defendant is not who she's claiming to be, Your Honor." A quiet murmur spread across the gallery. Judge Calloway's face, previously scornful and twisted, revealed a flicker of confusion. "Young lady," he demanded, voice cracking slightly, "just who are you?" Danielle reached into her bag and withdrew a sheaf of documents. The bailiff carried them up to the judge. At first glance, Judge Calloway's eyebrows merely quirked in annoyance. But as he read, his eyebrows shot upward, his scowl melting into a look of absolute disbelief. Gasps echoed. It was clear that in this moment, the entire courtroom realized Danielle Sterling was no ordinary teenager. It made them wonder, how had this all begun? The early days in Eastwood. Danielle had grown up in Eastwood, a lower middle-class suburb about an hour from the bustling downtown. She lived with her grandmother, Carolyn Sterling, a retired guidance counselor whose gentle wisdom guided Danielle through life. Since childhood, Danielle demonstrated startling intellectual gifts, winning elementary debate tournaments at age 8 and rummaging through law books in the local library when others her age read comic strips. But she was not the type to flaunt her intellect. She knew how to blend in at her local high school, taking honors classes in the mornings and volunteering at a community legal clinic after school. That clinic, perched at the edge of a strip mall, would prove critical to her journey. It was where she'd learned the gritty reality behind many evictions, predatory loans, and unscrupulous landlords. It was also where she discovered that laws are only as just as the people enforcing them. One day at the grocery store, Danielle overheard an agonized conversation. Audrey Parker, a single mother of 2, stood by the milk aisle, quietly sobbing into her cell phone. She was on the verge of eviction, accused by her landlord of violating rental terms she swore she hadn't broken. Audrey, apparently, had nowhere to go and no clue what her legal options were. Danielle carefully approached. "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm sorry to intrude, but I couldn't help overhearing," she said softly. "Maybe I can help." Audrey blinked, clearly flustered. "Help? You're just a kid." "I'm studying law," Danielle replied, "and I volunteer at the local legal aid clinic. Could you maybe show me the paperwork?" Though uncertain, Audrey eventually handed Danielle a folder. Inside were disorganized receipts, warnings from the landlord, a typed notice of eviction. Danielle recognized immediate red flags. She offered to help Audrey draft a response letter. Skeptical but desperate, Audrey accepted. In Danielle's small bedroom that evening, the teen went through every single page, cross-checking the terms with local housing codes. Sure enough, the landlord's claims were riddled with inconsistencies. Danielle typed up a formal response and, with her grandmother's help, made sure it was properly formatted. She mailed it out the next morning. That letter was ignored. Before long, an eviction summons arrived for Audrey, set to be heard in small claims court. When Audrey's attempts to find an affordable lawyer failed, Danielle, still in high school, decided to do the unthinkable: represent Audrey pro bono. The fateful court date. Word of Audrey's child attorney spread through Eastwood like wildfire. Some in the neighborhood laughed about a kid in a suit. Others whispered that Danielle was known to be freakishly bright. A few local reporters got wind of the unusual pairing and showed up, hungry for a good story. On the day of the hearing, Audrey, wearing a hand-me-down blouse, trembled at the plaintiff's table. Danielle stood next to her, calm eyes scanning the room. The defense was helmed by Philip Greenwald, a landlord's attorney so slick he practically shimmered in the fluorescent lights. Judge Calloway presided, hair combed back in stiff pomade, lips curled in near-permanent disdain. Judge Calloway eyed Danielle with open condescension. "Young lady, is your attorney running late?" he hissed. Danielle didn't waver. "I'm representing Ms. Parker, Your Honor." He raised both eyebrows, letting an incredulous chuckle slip. "Let the record show the defendant is self-represented, apparently with the aid of a minor." "Very well. Proceed, Ms. Parker. Let's try to keep it under an hour." That was the moment Danielle calmly laid out how the landlord's eviction complaint violated the Local Tenant Protection Act. She identified contradictory statements in the landlord's sworn affidavit, cited case precedents, and pointed out that Audrey's rent was current. The hush that fell over the courtroom was so absolute. One could hear the shuffle of a single piece of paper. Even the bailiff, who had been smirking, leaned forward, arms crossed, now listening intently. After about 20 minutes, Judge Calloway, clearly trying to maintain composure, addressed Danielle directly. "You said you volunteer at the legal clinic?" "Yes, Your Honor," she said. "I also study law, extensively." His jaw clenched, but he motioned for the opposing counsel to respond. Greenwald, flustered, objected to nearly everything Danielle had said. He tried to discount the amateurish approach, but found himself tangled in Danielle's precisely structured arguments. At that point, the entire gallery realized Danielle was systematically dismantling the case. It was something no one, especially Judge Calloway, had expected from a 17-year-old. An alarming revelation. The official transcripts from that hearing would later become local legend. The final blow came when Danielle introduced a letter from the city's zoning board stating the landlord's claims about Audrey's unauthorized modifications and overcrowding were baseless. The clerk read the letter aloud, each line contradicting the landlord's sworn statements. Greenwald's airtight case collapsed. He began shuffling through notes, sweating. Meanwhile, Judge Calloway's face grew more thunderstruck by the minute, culminating in a stunned directive. "Clerk, set a brief recess. I need time to review these findings." Danielle nodded, graceful under the judge's scrutiny. The recess was called. For about 10 minutes, the entire gallery buzzed, whispering about the brilliant teen who just might obliterate the landlord's position. Yet for Danielle, the drama was only just beginning. Dueling allegations. When the session resumed, the tension could have been sliced with a scalpel. Judge Calloway stared down at Danielle. "Well, Ms. Sterling, your arguments are unusually compelling." She offered a polite nod. "Thank you, Your Honor." But Greenwald interjected. "Hold on. Your Honor, I have reason to suspect these exhibits have been tampered with. The defendant's so-called legal advisor might be forging documents." "I move that we." Audrey gasped. Danielle stiffened. Judge Calloway rubbed his temple. "Do you have evidence of this alleged forgery, Mr. Greenwald?" Greenwald's cheeks flushed. "Not yet, but it's likely." "Then hold your peace," the judge snapped. "This court won't entertain claims of forgery without an iota of proof." "Ms. Sterling, please proceed." Danielle calmly explained the authenticity of each piece of evidence, referencing timestamps and city records. By the time she was done, even the few snickering observers realized they weren't dealing with a naive teen, but someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The unthinkable. After concluding her thorough examination of evidence, Danielle inhaled and made a final, bold statement. "Your Honor, if there's any doubt as to my competency or credentials, I'm prepared to clarify that right now. Judge Calloway glanced at her warily. Elaborate. Danielle retrieved a thick envelope from her bag and handed it to the bailiff, who passed it up to the bench. As he perused the contents, the color drained from the judge's face. The document showed that Danielle had, under a unique exception for prodigies, taken and passed a special bar examination, though not the standard one for typical attorneys. She was recognized to practice in certain small claim situations, supervised by the local legal clinic. The room erupted in gasps. Reporters scrawled notes. The judge's hand shook. Even Audrey looked overwhelmed with relief and awe. Miss Sterling, the judge managed, I'd no idea. His usual arrogance faltered, replaced with a stammer. A chaotic wave of conversation and confusion flooded the courtroom. Judge Calloway hammered his gavel. Order, order. Then his eyes flicked to Danielle. We'll proceed, Miss Sterling. You have the floor. The backstory, Danielle's bar exemption. In a swirl of commotion, we glimpse how Danielle acquired that document. At 14, she'd found a never-used loophole in the Stonebridge legal statutes, allowing exceptionally gifted individuals to sit for a narrow specialized exam. She studied relentlessly in secret. It became her personal mission, a silent vow to help people like Audrey, who otherwise had no champion. The local legal clinic, under a forward-thinking judge's sign-off, provided mentorship. Over 2 years, Danielle tackled more case law than most paralegal students do in 4. It was a path she didn't flaunt, especially not to her high school classmates. She dreaded attention, but Audrey's predicament forced Danielle's hand. Once the hearing started, she had no choice but to reveal her true capabilities to salvage Audrey's home. Ties to a bigger battle. Meanwhile, a subplot simmered under the surface. Edison Lombard, the slumlord behind Audrey's building, had a reputation for evicting tenants to renovate units and then charge exorbitant rent. Lombard rarely showed his face in court, preferring to send attorneys like Greenwald to do his dirty work. He had powerful friends around Stonebridge realtors, council members, and financial backers. Rumor had it that Lombard specialized in sweeping inconvenient truths under the rug. Audrey's eviction was supposed to be a quick and dirty affair, an easy win. No one in Lombard's orbit imagined a teenager would stand in the way. A teenager with the gall to produce real evidence. Eviction tactics exposed. After the judge recovered from his initial shock, Danielle resumed. She presented a paper trail showing the landlord had pressured multiple tenants to break lease contracts, then blamed them for lease violations. Furthermore, Danielle introduced testimonies from 2 ex-tenants, Caroline Moss and Victor Ingram, who alleged they'd been coerced into moving under threat of lawsuits and inflated fees. Greenwald turned livid. He tried to object repeatedly, claiming Danielle had no standing to represent other parties. Judge Calloway shot him down. I'll allow it, the judge declared. This pattern of behavior is relevant. As Danielle spoke, the onlookers saw the cracks in Lombard's empire. He was systematically displacing lower-income tenants, then quickly remodeling and jacking up rent. This wasn't just Audrey's crisis, it was an entire neighborhood's. Audrey, sitting at Danielle's side, began to cry tears of relief. She saw she wasn't alone. The defining clash. The day's hearing ended with Judge Calloway announcing a temporary injunction on Audrey's eviction while he reviewed Danielle's documents. A date for further evidence was set 2 weeks away. Audrey was safe, at least for now, but Danielle sensed this was just the opening salvo. That evening, as Danielle left the courthouse, a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped from the shadows near a marble pillar. He wore a tailored suit that screamed power. A flicker of a smirk played across his lips. Danielle recognized him from a photograph at the legal clinic, Edison Lombard himself. You're a real star, aren't you? Lombard said, voice dangerously low. But you're meddling in grown-up business, little girl. That's going to backfire on you. Danielle's pulse hammered, but she refused to show fear. I'm just fighting for what's right. You should be worried. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Careful, Miss Sterling. I have ways of dealing with pests. She met his gaze squarely. Then I guess I'll see you in court. Lombard's jaw tightened before he turned and walked off into the dusk. 2 weeks of mounting pressure. A swirl of rumors erupted around Stonebridge. Some local blogs hailed Danielle as a teenage hero, while others claimed the case was a publicity stunt. Anonymous phone calls began to haunt Danielle's grandmother at home hang-ups, heavy breathing. At one point, a letter arrived threatening grave consequences if Danielle didn't drop the case. Carolyn Sterling grew frightened for her granddaughter's safety, but Danielle pressed on. Simultaneously, Audrey discovered suspicious repairs at her apartment had gone unaddressed, presumably to force her out. Danielle reported these new code violations to the housing authority, amassing more evidence. Meanwhile, the local press splashed headlines like, "Teen legal prodigy takes on powerful landlord." And so, the stage was set for a final showdown, one that would either vindicate Danielle or overshadow her with impossible intimidation tactics. The return to Stonebridge Courthouse. On the appointed day, the courtroom was jammed beyond capacity. Observers lined the walls, the hum of voices high with anticipation. Even the usual courthouse staff wore slightly expectant expressions, aware that something special was happening. Audrey clutched her worn purse, trembling. Danielle laid a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We're ready," she whispered. Greenwald stood at the defense table, meticulously flipping pages. 2 more attorneys flanked him. Judge Calloway surveyed the room from behind his bench, apparently bracing for chaos. "All right," the judge said, striking his gavel. "We'll continue the matter of Parker versus Lombard Properties. Ms. Sterling, are you prepared to submit your additional evidence?" Danielle rose, her voice steady, and launched into a detailed breakdown of how Lombard's company systematically fabricated violations. She presented photos, inspection reports, sworn statements from neighbors. She cited local ordinances and even certain federal housing guidelines. With each revelation, those flanking Greenwald grew more agitated. Then came the surprise. Danielle introduced a chain of emails obtained from a whistleblower in Lombard's property management office, showing explicit instructions on how to pressure out low-paying tenants. Gasps echoed in the gallery. The judge's scowl deepened. Greenwald pounced. "Objection, Your Honor. This is newly submitted evidence. We haven't had time to authenticate it." Danielle nodded calmly. "I anticipated this reaction, Your Honor. So I had the emails authenticated by a digital forensics expert." She handed forward an affidavit attesting to the chain of custody. The judge skimmed it, pressed his lips together, and waved Greenwald silent. The gavel came down once more. "We'll allow it." Twists and accusations. Suddenly, a tall figure in a navy suit strode up to the defense table. Danielle recognized him from the corner of her eye. Lombard again. He whispered furiously to Greenwald. Then Lombard stepped forward. "Your Honor, I have evidence that Ms. Sterling, this so-called teenage savant, has been forging documents. We have new affidavits supporting the claim." Judge Calloway arched an eyebrow. "Affidavits from whom?" Lombard tossed a packet onto the table, sending up a flurry of papers. "From individuals who claim Ms. Sterling promised them money to testify or produce certain damning emails. I'm moved to dismiss all her evidence on that basis." A hush dropped, heavier than before. Even Danielle froze. Audrey's mouth fell open. Danielle took a breath. "Your Honor, these accusations are completely false. I request a short recess to examine these affidavits and present a rebuttal. This is a blatant last-minute smear." The judge frowned, flipping through the pages. "It does appear suspiciously timed. Let's reconvene in 1 hour. Court is in recess." Panic in the hallway. During the hour's recess, Danielle and Audrey retreated to a corridor near the judge's chambers. Audrey's face was ashen. "Danielle, this is insane. They're making up entire affidavits?" Danielle gritted her teeth. "I'm sure they are, but I can't ignore it. We have to disprove it fast." Just then, a reporter, Talia Brooks, approached them. "Danielle Sterling, do you have any comment on Lombard's accusations?" Danielle stiffened. "No comment until I review the documents." "Now excuse me." She ducked into a side lounge, flipping through the affidavits. They were signed by 3 supposed witnesses who claimed to have seen Danielle bribing them. Each signature was only an initial scrawl. Aunt Carolyn, who'd come along to watch, hustled up and patted Danielle's shoulder. "You can do this, honey," Aunt Carolyn whispered. "Remember your training. Don't let them see you flustered." Danielle forced a nod. She had about 30 minutes left to prepare a line-by-line rebuttal. She dialed the forensics expert who'd authenticated the emails, forwarding him scans of the suspicious affidavits. The verdict was swift. These witness statements are riddled with inconsistencies. The addresses on them trace back to vacant lots. Relief surged through Danielle's veins. This was all she needed. The rebuttal. When the session resumed, the tension rose. Judge Calloway glowered from on high. "Ms. Sterling, have you had time to examine these affidavits?" "Yes, Your Honor," she said, confidence returning. She presented new evidence, cross-checked addresses, forensics on typed signatures, and public record searches confirming the addresses were non-existent or vacant. These so-called witnesses appear not to exist, or at least do not reside where these affidavits claim. A ripple of murmurs passed through the gallery. Lombard's jaw tightened. Greenwald whispered frantically to him. Judge Calloway tapped his pen against the bench, stifling a scowl. "Mr. Lombard," the judge addressed him directly, "are you aware that supplying falsified affidavits is grounds for serious sanctions?" Lombard tried to speak, but only croaked out, Someone must have given me bad information. We'll deal with this separately." The judge cut him off sharply. "For now, Ms. Sterling's submissions remain valid. Let's continue with the original matter. The landlord's downfall." The hearing entered its final stretch. Danielle calmly resumed, connecting the dots between Lombard's underhanded tactics and Audrey's eviction. The patterns were too glaring to dismiss. Even Judge Calloway, known for his unpredictability, wore an expression that signaled he'd seen enough. Greenwald's voice quavered as he tried to salvage the case. "Your Honor, we can't confirm the timeline Ms. Sterling is claiming, and these city documents might be incomplete." But the judge waved him off. "Unless you have a genuine evidentiary challenge, I'm about ready to rule." The gallery stiffened. Reporters raised cameras. A hush fell. Lombard stared daggers at Danielle, who met his gaze with measured resolve. Judge Calloway cleared his throat. "I find in favor of Ms. Parker. The eviction notice is null and void. Furthermore, given the suspicious nature of affidavits and allegations of document tampering, I'm referring Mr. Lombard's behavior to the district attorney's office for further investigation." Audrey crumpled into tears of relief. People in the gallery burst into applause, quickly shushed by the bailiff. Lombard lurched up from his seat, fists clenched, but Greenwald grabbed his arm, muttering caution. Judge Calloway banged his gavel a final time. "Court is adjourned." Outside the courtroom, a new threat. Audrey and Danielle barely made it into the hallway before reporters swarmed them, peppering questions about Danielle's background and Lombard's potential criminal charges. Audrey, teary-eyed, could only muster thanks to Danielle. Danielle, politely trying to keep calm, repeated, "I'm just relieved justice was served." A flash of movement caught Danielle's eye. Lombard. He stood by the far exit, lips curled in a snarl. For a moment, their gazes locked. Then, with a slight tilt of his head, he mouthed, "This isn't over." An eerie chill crawled up Danielle's spine. The backlash begins. The next morning, local media outlets exploded with stories. Teen prodigy attorney triumphs over slumlord, Stonebridge landlord under criminal investigation. As Danielle tried to resume her normal routine going to math class, doing homework in the library, she found herself recognized in hallways, approached by curious classmates, and cornered by journalists outside the school gates. Meanwhile, Lombard's company, Lombard Holdings, issued a press release proclaiming innocence, calling Danielle a misguided minor playing pretend. Online trolls echoed those sentiments. Hate mail found its way to the Sterling's mailbox. Yet for every negative voice, a dozen residents came forward, grateful that anyone had the guts to take on Lombard. Letters piled up at the legal clinic from other tenants, urging Danielle to help them fight evictions or unscrupulous rent hikes. Grandmother Carolyn worried about the mounting pressure. "Danielle, you're only 17, she implored. "You have your whole future. Please don't let them ruin your life." But Danielle had already resolved to continue. "Grandma, Audrey's case isn't the only one. I have to keep going." A larger conspiracy emerges. Weeks passed. Investigators from the district attorney's office contacted Danielle for a statement about Lombard's alleged intimidation. She answered their questions politely. Yet trouble stirred beneath the surface. Rumors suggested Lombard had ties to shady developers who'd grown used to bulldozing entire neighborhoods to build luxury condos. The Parker case threatened to expose more than just petty landlord harassment. It might unravel a multi-million-dollar scheme. Audrey, now secure in her apartment, confided in Danielle that she discovered multiple families in the building had faced suspicious notices. Some left quietly. Others vanished, refusing to discuss details. The building's superintendent admitted under Danielle's gentle questioning that he'd been told to shut off heat and water for certain problem tenants. In short, Lombard was only a fraction of a tangled web. The nighttime visit. One chilly evening, Danielle was leaving the local library, arms loaded with law tomes. As she rounded a corner into the dimly lit parking lot, a figure in a black coat stepped out, still rummaging around for ways to stir up trouble. The voice was male, low, and steady. She didn't recognize him. "Who are you?" she demanded, doing her best not to sound intimidated. "Just a friend of Lombard," he said, approaching slowly. "I'm here to give you some advice. Drop your investigations, or someone might get hurt." Her heart thundered, but Danielle planted her feet. "I'm not backing off." He let out a menacing laugh. "Don't say I didn't warn you." Then he strolled away, vanishing into the dark. Shaken, Danielle dialed 911 to report the threat. The police officer who arrived took notes, but seemed unimpressed. "Could we just talk?" he said. "We'll file a report, but that's all we can do." Rallying support. Alarmed at the intimidation tactics, Aunt Carolyn urged Danielle to contact an old friend, attorney Patricia Schwartz, known for her civil rights work. Patricia met Danielle at a coffee shop near the courthouse. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest," Patricia said quietly, sipping a latte. "I've heard your name floating around City Hall. Big real estate moguls are not thrilled by your victory." Danielle's resolve only hardened. "So what's next?" "I can't let them shut me up." Patricia smiled knowingly. "Then we go bigger. You might just have the momentum to spark a class action suit for all those Lombard tenants who were coerced out. With the DA's current interest, you could help bring down the entire operation." Danielle's eyes widened. Class actions were complicated, but if it protected families from future evictions, I'm in, she breathed. The gathering storm. Over the next month, rumors of a class action lawsuit swirled. Danielle spent every spare moment outside school hours collecting affidavits from ex-tenants, scouring city records, and forwarding evidence to the DA. Audrey helped, reaching out to families who'd been too scared to speak before. Grandmother Carolyn juggled phone calls from local activists offering support. Meanwhile, Lombard struck back. The top floors of his firm's office building buzzed with strategy meetings. He hired new attorneys Monroe Ellis, a white shoe firm known for burying opponents in legal motions. Soon, Danielle found herself served with demands for depositions and intrusive document requests. They were trying to intimidate her, drain her time, and dissuade other tenants from joining. But the more they fought, the more the public rallied around Danielle. Donations poured into the Eastwood Legal Clinic, earmarked to help the fight against landlord corruption. A local nonprofit, Housing for All, offered their resources. A local investigative reporter, Talia Brooks, the same who'd approached Danielle in the hallway, published an expose on Lombard's real estate empire, highlighting Danielle's role. The article, titled "Teen Genius Battles the Stonebridge Machine," went viral. A new ally in court. Finally, the day arrived for a preliminary hearing on whether the class action could proceed. The courthouse halls were jam-packed again, reminiscent of the earlier drama. Audrey, joined by a dozen other ex-tenants, flanked Danielle. On the other side, Lombard's legal cavalry waited, impeccably suited, expressionless. Before the hearing began, someone touched Danielle's arm gently. It was Patricia Schwartz. "I decided to join you formally," Patricia whispered. "You have the evidence, but I have the law license and the years of trial experience. If the judge grants standing, we'll do this together." Relief washed over Danielle. She wasn't entirely alone. Judge Calloway, seeing Patricia at Danielle's side, gave a curt nod. "A welcome development," he remarked from the bench. Lombard's counterattack. The attorneys from Monroe Ellis hammered the same claims. That Danielle was unqualified, that these tenants fabricated stories, that no pattern of wrongdoing existed. For over 3 hours, they threw up procedural roadblocks, challenging every name on the suit. Patricia responded with polished arguments, referencing statutory law. Danielle quietly assisted with facts, pointing out how each tenant's story fit into the overarching pattern. Audrey and others sat behind them, tension etched across their features. Then the defense dropped its trump card. "We have evidence that Danielle Sterling bribed or manipulated tenants into joining this suit," the lead lawyer declared triumphantly. Signed confessions. Judge Calloway's eyebrows shot up. Patricia stiffened. Danielle felt the floor tilt momentarily beneath her feet. Another set of affidavits? She recognized the tactic all too well. "Let's see it," demanded Patricia. But as soon as the defense tried to submit the documents, Danielle noticed repeated errors like misspelled tenant names and dates that didn't match the timeline. She whipped out her phone, verifying details. Then she passed a note to Patricia, who stood to address the court. "These so-called confessions are riddled with falsehoods," Patricia declared. "My co-counsel, Ms. Sterling, and I will demonstrate the perjury in due time, if the court requests it. This is a transparent attempt to discredit the entire class." Judge Calloway glowered down at the defense attorneys. "If these documents are found to be fraudulent, the consequences for Lombard Holdings and Monroe Ellis will be severe. I'll allow the plaintiffs a week to verify their authenticity." The hearing ended with no conclusive decision, but Patricia's expression was confident. As soon as they were outside, she and Danielle huddled with the ex-tenants. "We got them on the ropes," Patricia said. "Now we just need final proof." The revelation: a whistleblower emerges. That evening, a call came to the Eastwood Legal Clinic's main line. Logan Kim, a mid-level employee at Lombard Holdings, wanted to talk confidentially. He claimed to have direct knowledge about the fabricated affidavits. Danielle, Audrey, and Patricia met him in a quiet corner booth at a 24-hour diner. Logan, eyes darting anxiously, placed a folder on the table. "These are emails showing instructions from Lombard's top exec to plant fake confessions. I couldn't watch them ruin more families. But if they know I leaked this, my life might be in danger." Patricia assured him they'd do everything to protect him as a whistleblower. Danielle skimmed the emails, her stomach flipping. It was all spelled out in black and white, from paying off anonymous signers to forging signatures. It was enough to bury Lombard's entire defense. "You're doing the right thing," Audrey told him softly. "You'll help hundreds of people." Logan sniffled. "I hope so." The final showdown. 1 week later, the hearing reconvened. The tension felt like a coiled spring. Danielle and Patricia introduced Logan Kim's whistleblower documents, meticulously linking each piece to the spurious affidavits. They explained how Lombard's staff orchestrated the entire scam, from forging signatures to pressuring tenants. A hush sealed the room. The presiding judge, Calloway, turned his steely gaze on the row of defense attorneys. "These are serious allegations, backed by credible documentation." The lead lawyer for Monroe Ellis tried one last tactic. "Your Honor, we question the chain of custody." But Patricia was ready. She produced notarized statements from Logan Kim and digital forensic proof that no tampering occurred. "This is an unmistakable pattern of perjury," Patricia concluded, "and it stems directly from Lombard Holdings." Judge Calloway stared at them gravely. "Ms. Sterling, Ms. Schwartz, you've presented a compelling case for the tenants. The motion to dismiss is denied. The class action lawsuit will proceed. Moreover, I'm referring these new findings to the district attorney for possible criminal charges." Gasps, cheers, a flurry of photographs, pandemonium reigned as the judge called for order. Lombard rose, face beet red. "You can't do this," he shouted. "I won't let." "Sit down, Mr. Lombard," the judge rumbled, "or you'll be in contempt." He sat, but his glare at Danielle was livid. The teen attorney looked back, unwavering. She'd won. The critical step tenants would get their day in court, collectively, against a man who'd terrorized them for far too long. Aftermath, a movement grows. Over the next few weeks, the story dominated local news. National outlets picked it up too. Teen prodigy leads class action suit against corrupt landlord empire. Donations and volunteers poured in from across the state. The Eastwood Legal Clinic expanded into a bigger space, adopting the name Stonebridge Justice Alliance. Danielle found herself balancing final exams at school with depositions for the class action, a surreal dual existence. Audrey, newly free of eviction threats, took on a volunteer role at the clinic. "You saved my family," she often told Danielle, "and now we're saving others." Patricia Schwartz made Danielle her unofficial law clerk, a rare privilege for someone yet to graduate high school. "Kid," Patricia said with a grin, "I've never seen anything like you. You're going to change the world." Lombard's arrest. Eventually, the district attorney concluded a criminal investigation, backed by Logan Kim's whistleblowing. Lombard faced charges for fraud, witness intimidation, and conspiracy. Police arrived at his downtown office in the late afternoon, escorting him out in handcuffs. Cameras captured his outraged shouts of innocence. Stonebridge was abuzz with shock and celebration. Families who had been displaced or harassed felt some measure of vindication. Danielle watched the news footage that night with Aunt Carolyn sipping hot chocolate in the living room. "Is it finally over?" Carolyn asked softly. Danielle shook her head. "Not yet. There's still the class action. But this is a big step." Carolyn pulled Danielle into a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you. I was so afraid, but you never backed down." A final hurdle. 3 months later, the class action lawsuit against Lombard Holdings and its affiliates reached a pivotal settlement negotiation. With Lombard behind bars awaiting trial, Monroe Ellis sought to limit damages by offering a massive settlement for the displaced tenants. Patricia, Danielle, and a handful of the tenants met in a polished downtown conference room, windows overlooking the city skyline. Across the table, the defense team tried to maintain their bravado, but it was clear they'd lost much of their leverage. Danielle listened quietly as Patricia made demands. All forcibly evicted families get reimbursed, plus a rent freeze for existing tenants, plus damages for emotional distress. And we want an independent oversight committee ensuring compliance with housing laws. The lead defense attorney balked. "Oversight? That's unprecedented." Patricia arched an eyebrow. "So, was a teenager unraveling your entire operation?" Yet here we are. After hours of negotiations and phone calls, the final agreement was hammered out, awarding the tenants not only monetary compensation, but also instituting new community oversight, a groundbreaking precedent. The defense attorneys signed reluctantly, but they knew they had no choice. Vindication. A press conference followed outside the courthouse. Patricia graciously thanked everyone who'd supported the case. Audrey, near tears, recounted how she nearly lost everything. Other tenants spoke of dark nights, sleeping in cars, or couch surfing. Then the spotlight shifted to Danielle Sterling. "She's an inspiration," Patricia declared. This settlement wouldn't have happened without her tireless work, her intelligence, and her bravery in the face of threats. Danielle tried to keep her statement short. "I'm just grateful we could do what's right," she said. "And I hope this helps everyone see that sometimes it only takes one voice to start changing a broken system." Reporters clamored for more, but Danielle stepped away, letting Audrey and the other tenants enjoy their hard-won victory. Cameras flashed. Applause followed. Stonebridge had never quite seen anything like this. The quiet epilogue. That night, Danielle and Aunt Carolyn celebrated in the simplest of ways: homemade spaghetti and a hug. Carolyn insisted on calling extended family to share the news. Danielle escaped to her room for a moment, gazing at a newspaper clipping pinned above her desk. The headline read, "Teen turns the tables on notorious landlord." She recalled the sneers from Judge Calloway, the hush of the gallery, the menacing threats from Lombard. She remembered Audrey's tears of relief, the weight of reading legal codes late into the night, the sense of purpose that guided her. She also felt the fatigue, the longing for normal teenage experiences: prom, graduation, college. But she understood her path would forever be entwined with justice. Because for every Audrey Parker, there were countless others who didn't know how to fight back. She resolved to keep going, to become a full-fledged attorney, to continue dismantling systems that preyed on the vulnerable. A phone alert pinged an email from a tenant in another county seeking help. Danielle exhaled a slow, steady breath. The fight for justice was never truly over. Her gaze flicked to the corner of the desk, where her battered law textbooks sat. She smiled gently to herself. Tomorrow, a new day would dawn, and with it, new challenges. But Danielle Sterling, genius teenage attorney, unstoppable force, was ready. Legacy in the making. In the years to come, Danielle Sterling's name became synonymous with housing advocacy across the region. Colleges offered her scholarships. A documentary crew filmed her story. She declined many interviews but used her growing platform to champion legal reforms, pushing state legislators to enact stronger tenant protections. Audrey Parker became one of the lead organizers in Stonebridge's New Tenant Coalition, forging alliances with other neighborhoods facing gentrification. Judge Calloway, once scornful, was rumored to privately commend Danielle in chambers, telling colleagues he had never been so thoroughly corrected in court. Meanwhile, Lombard's empire collapsed under criminal indictments, exposing collusion with city officials. Investigations shone a harsh light on deep-seated corruption. Many of Lombard associates faced charges. The entire fiasco became a cautionary tale in law schools and seminars. Never underestimate the power of a well-prepared legal mind, no matter how young. As for Danielle, she found herself with a new calling: empowering other youths. She began speaking at legal clubs in local high schools, inspiring them to volunteer at clinics. If she could do it, so could others. Perhaps that was the greatest victory of all, sparking a generation of advocates, each determined to stand against injustice.